There are no bad teams, only bad leaders. Good management can lead to failure of large companies. Thinking big isn't about being delusional. Focus on the change you are trying to make. Your title makes you a manager. Your people make you a leader. Let's dive into 10 game-changing books, and I'm gonna give you the juiciest takeaways from each one. No fluff, just the good stuff. Let's start. First up is the power of now. Look, we're all stuck in this endless cycle of thinking about yesterday's embarrassing moments or tomorrow's problems. And here's the thing, none of that is real. The only thing that exists is right now, this moment. When I first got this, it hit me like a truck. All my anxiety, all my stress, it was all about stuff that wasn't even happening. Here's what's wild. Your mind creates these elaborate stories about the future, like that presentation next week that you're freaking out about. Your brain is literally making up scenarios that don't exist. In the past, those cringe moments from high school that keep you up at night, they only exist in your head. The moment I started catching myself living in the future or past and snapping back to now, everything changed. Let me give you some practical stuff that worked for me. First, I started with a simple exercise. Whenever I caught myself spiraling about the future or past, I would focus on my breathing for just 30 seconds. Just feeling the air go in and out. Another trick, I started asking myself, what problem do I have right this second? Not in an hour, not tomorrow, right now. 99% of the time, the answer was nothing. Even during tough times, I realized I could handle what was happening right now. It was the imagined future that was freaking me out. One more game changer. I started doing what the author calls watching the thinker. Basically, notice your thoughts as if you're watching a movie. When you catch yourself worrying about that meeting next week, just go, oh, there's that thought again. And just let it pass by. Your power isn't in yesterday or tomorrow, it's in this moment right now. Now, speaking of being present, you know what else requires intense presence? Deep work. And this is where things get interesting, because while power of now is about being present spiritually, deep work is about being present with your work. The ability to focus deeply is actually becoming a superpower in a world that's constantly trying to distract you. Think about it. When was the last time you worked for 3 hours straight without checking your phone? And here's the kicker. All the meaningful work, the stuff that really moves the needle, happens in those deep work states. Now, why is that? When you switch between tasks, like writing a report but checking Slack every 5 minutes, you're not just wasting those few seconds when you just check your message. Your brain actually needs about 23 minutes to fully get back into the deep focus state. It's wild, right? So here's what I started doing after reading this book. First of all, I began tracking my actual focus time. Not the time that I spent at my desk, the time I spent doing the real intense work. And I had a brutal wake-up call. I thought I was working 8 to 12 hours a day. Turns out it was close to 3 to 4 hours of real, actual work. And the rest was just busy work and distractions. What I did was I started small, 30-minute, complete focus work session. Phone in another room, email closed, door shut, full concentration. Then I worked it up to 90 minutes and eventually to 4 hours of undisturbed focus the first thing in the morning, before my mind got polluted or disturbed by other things that I needed to do. And that was a total game changer. What I also did was batching all my shallow work, like emails, replying to Asana tasks, quick calls, into specific time blocks in the afternoon after my 4-hour deep work session. Now, once you've mastered deep work, you might be wondering, what should I actually work on? What is the most important work that I should do in those sessions? Enter the one thing. This book is beautifully simple. Just stop trying to do everything. Not everything is equally important. But even if it was, you have to choose between doing 5 things with mediocrity or doing one thing the best way with the highest quality. Now the question is, how do you choose what that one thing is? It's actually pretty simple. Ask yourself this one question. What's the one thing I can do so that by doing it, everything else becomes easier or unnecessary? It's like having a domino effect in your life. Find that one domino piece that, when pushed, knocks down all the others. For example, in our business, I noticed I was doing like 50 different things to grow, from social media content across all channels to recruiting, email marketing, managing and promoting 5 different products. When I actually looked at the numbers, I saw that 80% of our customers came from YouTube and bought one specific product, which was Devil's Bootcamp. So that was my one thing. So I decided to double down and focus on this one channel and one product, and basically made all the other stuff secondary. And by making that switch, actually by simplifying my own work, we increased revenue by 30% within 1 month. But you know what the hardest part of this thing is? Actually dropping the other stuff. We feel productive when we're doing lots of things, but that's usually just busy work. And it's difficult psychologically to ignore many things that you see as great opportunities because you get a FOMO, fear of missing out. So here's where people mess this up. They try to have multiple one things because they can't let go of the other stuff because they still seem very important. But that's completely missing the point. The magic happens when you go all in on that single lever and being psychologically strong enough to let go of these other also amazing things in order to focus on that one thing. So this means if you want to find real one thing, first of all, pick an area of life, work, health, relationships, whatever, then list everything that you are doing in that area and ask yourself, if I could do only one of these things and had to drop everything else, without compromise, which would give me the best results overall? That's gonna be your one thing. You know who really gets this concept of extreme focus? Navy SEALs. In Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink, he shares the most crucial lesson from the battlefield that applies to basically everything in life, which is take 100% responsibility for everything in your life. No excuses, no blame game. Your team messed up, it's your leadership. Project failed, your responsibility. Marriage problems, you should look in the mirror first. It's pretty heavy, but it's also weirdly liberating. Because if everything is your responsibility, that means you have the power to change everything and control everything in your life. And the book is amazing for learning leadership lessons. The core principle that Navy SEAL commanders hammer home is there are no bad teams, only bad leaders. And good leaders take complete ownership of everything in their world. For example, during a mission in Ramadi, there was a literal friendly fire incident between SEAL teams and the Iraqi friendly forces. Total chaos. In the debrief, every officer had an excuse. Bad communication, unclear intel, confusing situation. But Willink, as the commander, stood up and said, "This is my fault. I didn't ensure our friendly forces were properly coordinated. I didn't make the communication channels clear enough. I own this." And that moment not only changed his own perception of owning mistakes as a commander, but also how his unit viewed him as a leader. So one principle is you always push responsibility up, not down. If your team messes up, that's on you. You didn't train them well enough. You didn't set clear enough expectations or provide the right resources. Second principle is cover and move. In combat, one team covers while another moves. In business, this means departments must support each other instead of competing with each other, which happens very often. Third principle is simplicity. If people aren't executing your plan is too complex. Another important concept in the book was prioritize and execute. In combat, again, they often face multiple urgent threats. Their solution? The mantra is relax, look around, make a call, which basically means take a step back, determine the highest priority threat, deal with it, then move on to the next one. And they actually used this when their unit was pinned down by enemy fire while a building was burning behind them and the wounded needed evacuation. By staying calm and tackling one problem at a time in order of urgency, the team survived. This mindset of ownership actually leads perfectly into the magic of thinking big. The book's golden nugget: your life is limited by the size of your thinking, period. But here's the thing, thinking big isn't about being delusional. It's about understanding that your brain doesn't know the difference between a big goal and a small goal. It requires the same amount of energy to think small as it does to think big. So why not choose thinking big? Book's core message is super simple. Success is not about intellect or talent, it's about the size of your thinking. Schwartz studied thousands of people's careers and found the person who believes they can do something is almost always right, and so is the person who believes they can't. There are a few ways to expand your thinking. First is getting rid of what he calls excusitis, the disease of making excuses. I'm not healthy enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm too old, I'm too young, I'm not lucky. His research showed that successful people had just as many potential excuses as non-successful ones. They just refused to use them. Another major concept is the power of belief. Belief in yourself, in your work, and belief in bigger possibilities. There are examples in his book of salespeople who were given the same exact territories and products, but those who believed they could hit bigger targets consistently outsold those who set realistic goals. There's also the big thinkers vocabulary. Instead of words impossible, can't, problem, using words like possible, can, opportunity. And it's not just positive thinking. This language actually changes how your brain processes challenges. When you call something a problem, your mind starts looking for difficulties. When you call it an opportunity, your brain looks for solutions. When you start thinking big, you naturally start asking different questions. Which brings us to this is marketing. The biggest lesson here, good marketing isn't about reaching everyone. It's about reaching the right people who actually want what you are making. So first, find your smallest viable market, which is the minimum number of people you need to succeed with your business. This group should be small enough to love and understand deeply what you're doing, but big enough to actually matter. Second, focus on the change you are trying to make. Do not sell products or services like commodities. Sell transformation, end result of what your products and services do. Ask yourself, what's different in someone's life after they work with you? That's your real offering. And that has been the biggest focus for us as well. And that's why we don't create courses to teach technologies. We exclusively create programs to teach people complete IT professions, like in universities, just faster and cheaper, so they can learn an actual profession to get a better paying job or get a pay raise in the existing one, which is the actual transformation they get from what we do. Another one is permission marketing over interruption marketing. Instead of shouting at people, earn the right to talk to them. Build trust through consistency and value. Here's what this looks like in practice. Start by identifying the specific people you want to serve. What are their dreams, their fears, their language? Then go and create content and products specifically for them. Don't worry about going viral or pleasing everyone. Focus on being essential to your chosen few. So it's not about going viral, it's about being vital to your tribe. Now, this idea of finding your people connects perfectly with Masters of Scale by Reid Hoffman. Hoffman, who co-founded LinkedIn and was an early executive at PayPal, teaches about some very counterintuitive concepts of building billion-dollar companies from zero. Here's the story of LinkedIn itself, which perfectly demonstrates this scale or die moment in startups. In the early days of LinkedIn, everyone was telling him it was a horrible idea, that the platform was worthless unless they could get professionals to share their entire business network on it, but they couldn't get those professionals because there was nobody else on the platform. It's a so-called cold start problem. Their solution was to start by targeting the unemployed. Why? Because unemployed people had the most incentive to put their full network on display and reach out to connections. They were also willing to invite their employed friends to help them in their job search. The second smart move was allowing users to upload their email address book to find connections. But with a twist. Instead of just showing them who was already on LinkedIn from the email list, which would have been disappointing in the early days, they showed people both who was on LinkedIn and who they could invite per email. This made the network feel larger than it was and basically leveraged the fact that sending invites was actually helping users reconnect with old colleagues. This strategy helped them reach their first million users. But here's what's fascinating. They had to deliberately slow down the viral growth at a certain point because too many invites too quickly made the platform feel spammy. They found that professionals were more likely to join if they got invites from multiple legitimate contacts spread over time rather than a blast of invites all at once. The key lesson Hoffman shares from this experience is scaling is not just about growing fast. It's also about growing smart. Sometimes you need to slow down parts of your growth to speed up overall adoption, which leads to the second mind-blowing concept, which is as counterintuitive as it is game-changing. It's do things that don't scale, direct opposite of growing fast. Enter Airbnb's story. In the early days, instead of focusing on rapid growth, the founders did something that seemed very irrational. They identified that majority of their first users were in New York. So they packed their bags and flew from Silicon Valley to New York, staying with hosts, getting to know them, getting feedback directly from them about their product, even taking professional photos of their properties to put on Airbnb. For a lot of businesses, including startups, this seems like wasting time. Like instead of working on developing the product and acquiring more customers and doing marketing and sales and investment and funding, you were sitting with your first 80 users and getting to know them and uploading photos of their properties while no new users are joining your platform, which means you're moving extremely slow. How could now $1 billion company founders be spending their time taking photos? But this unscalable activity taught them exactly what their platform needed to succeed and be exceptional for those few people and scale fast long term. Because they didn't just learn about their product, they learned about their users' psychology, motivations, and needs on a deeper level. So this deep understanding became the foundation for scaling their entire platform in the future. And this also ties into the lesson that has spread widely in Silicon Valley among startups, which is when building something initially, it's better for 1,000 people to love your product than 100,000 people to kind of like it. Speaking of scale, the Innovator's Dilemma presents a fascinating paradox. Good management can lead to failure of large companies. Here's why. Successful companies naturally focus on their best customers and improving their existing products. But disruptive innovations often start as inferior products by small startups serving small group of customers in emerging new markets. For example, an interesting story. In 1990s, Kodak dominated the $10 billion film market. When digital cameras first emerged from companies like Sony, Canon, and so on, they were pretty bad. The product was inferior. It was under 1 megapixel compared to film's 20 megapixels. But they served a new need: instant viewing and sharing. While Kodak was making $2.5 billion in profit from film, they completely ignored the small digital camera market. By 2003, digital cameras overtook film sales. And by 2012, Kodak went bankrupt while Canon, Nikon, and Sony thrived. The irony? Kodak actually invented the first digital camera in 1975, but they were too focused on protecting their profitable film business and completely ignored the digital revolution. But this is not an exception. This happens over and over again. Motorola is another famous example. A multi-billion-dollar company that ruled the market gets replaced by newcomers like Apple. And while it was a shock for the world, in fact, it was actually very natural. It was part of a natural cycle of the business world, where big companies, as they grow, they focus on making their current products better and better for their existing customers. Meanwhile, small startups create new products with innovations that first seem weak and unimportant. These startups target tiny markets that big companies ignore. Like a 20 million market opportunity is huge for a startup, but looks tiny to $1 billion business. So it's not interesting for them. So what happens is over time, these new products get better and cheaper and more accessible. So suddenly the small product becomes so good that it takes over the entire market and replaces the old alternative. The big company at this point, which was busy perfecting its old product, gets left behind. They're so late to the party that they can't catch up anymore. It's like watching a small, scrappy team slowly build something that completely changes the game without the big players even noticing that it's happening until it's too late. Now, this should be a powerful motivation for all the startups out there who think that they don't have a chance against large established companies. There's almost like this perfect formula to how to disrupt industries and take over incumbents as a small, scrappy startup. Now, a funny paradox that this book describes is that companies fail not because they are bad at what they do, but because they are great at what they do. It's just that what they do just becomes irrelevant. Now, there are a handful of companies who manage to break free from this cycle. How do they do that? Well, they create separate teams that work like independent startups. Imagine a giant corporation setting up a small, nimble team. This team operates differently. They can experiment, take risks, explore markets that seem too small or weird for the core company. And companies like Intel and Google have done this successfully. They basically create these internal startups that can develop breakthrough technologies without the constraints of the main business. It's like planting seeds of future innovation inside a massive established tree, which long-term makes sure that the company can adapt and survive when the market actually changes. This challenge of balancing present success with future innovation is exactly what Bill Campbell, the legendary Silicon Valley coach, addressed in $1 Trillion Coach. This book is actually written by few executives from Google about Bill Campbell. The book's biggest lesson is that the best leaders aren't the ones with all the answers. They're the ones who know how to bring out the best in others. Bill Campbell would often say, your title makes you a manager, your people make you a leader. And he worked with leaders from Google, Apple, Amazon, and he was a board member of these companies. So he was an important and very influential figure in the space, actually. His coaching has two core elements. First one was the radical candor approach. Bill Campbell, he believed in complete honesty combined with deep personal care. And he taught leaders that he coached to give feedback that was brutally direct, but also fundamentally compassionate. This meant telling people exactly what they needed to hear, but in a way that showed them that you genuinely wanted them to succeed. For example, he would tell executives their specific weaknesses very directly, but always with the underlying message of, I believe in you and I know you can improve. And this approach created a safe environment where people weren't afraid of criticism and actually saw it as an opportunity to grow. And this is an important lesson in leadership, that he showed that true leadership isn't about being nice or being tough even. It's about being honest and caring at the same time. The second principle was the team-first mindset. He fundamentally believed that individual success comes from the team success. Unlike many coaches who focus on individual performance, he obsessed about team chemistry and collective potential. He would often bring leadership teams together, not to discuss metrics, but to help them understand each other as just human beings, because he believed that was an important foundation for the team performance and team dynamics. He would help teams identify their collective blind spots, resolve any internal human conflicts, and build genuine trust between the the members. This meant sometimes having uncomfortable conversations, like breaking down personal barriers, but eventually helping team members see beyond their individual roles. The magic of this approach was very simple. He treated people as whole human beings, not just employees. He cared about their personal lives, their fears, their aspirations. This holistic care transformed how teams that he managed or coached worked together. And finally, my personal favorite book, Built to Last by Jim Collins. The core message here, some companies are like shooting stars, brilliant, explosive, but quickly fading. Think of companies like Netscape or MySpace, which were incredible, but disappeared quickly. They relied on a single brilliant idea or a charismatic founder. Other companies are like redwood trees. They grow slowly, have deep roots, and survive for generations. Companies like Disney, Hewlett-Packard, Johnson & Johnson have survived multiple leadership changes and economic shifts, multiple generations. So what is the key difference here? These lasting companies aren't built around one person's genius or one brilliant idea. They're actually built on a set of core principles that stay the same even when leaders change. Most people believe that a great company needs a superhero CEO or one amazing genius product idea. According to research of hundreds of companies, that's totally wrong. The companies that last for multiple decades or even generations have something that is different from the others that do not survive. They have core beliefs that do not change, even when new bosses take over. Think of it like a company's personality, something that stays the same no matter who is in charge. Now, core beliefs sounds a little too vague. So what does that even mean? They are basically the practical ways a company decides to do business. For Disney, the core belief is about creating magic and making people happy. This means every single decision, from how they design theme parks to how they make movies, comes back to creating this magical experience and making people happy. At 3M, the core belief is about constant innovation. They literally give employees time to work on wild ideas that might become something huge. And they have a rule that 15% of work time can be spent on personal projects, completely unrelated to existing products. And this is an example how the vague, abstract concept like we have a core belief of innovation becomes practical and is actually lived in a company on a day-to-day basis. So it's built into how they actually work. Another company, Patagonia, their core belief is about protecting the environment. To show that they care about nature, they make business decisions that sometimes cost them money in favor of supporting their environmental mission. Like they will repair clothes instead of encouraging people to buy new ones, or donate a percentage of profits to environmental causes. So these core beliefs aren't about being perfect and the most efficient or the most creative. They're about having a clear answer to one question, which is, what do we stand for? What matters most to us, even if it means costing us money? It's like having a personal code that guides everything that you do. Some actual practices that shows in action what the company truly cares about. The magic happens when these beliefs are so deep that they can survive new CEOs and executives as well as market changes, because that's when they become companies' true North Star. And there you have it, 10 books with the biggest lessons, all connected like pieces of a puzzle. But remember, knowledge isn't power. Knowledge is the potential power. The real power comes from applying what you learn. So I encourage you to pick one idea that resonated with you the most and start with that. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.